Good afternoon, Wani Saab. It's just turned midday in the UK. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Nice to see so many friends and colleagues, particularly with COVID still being pretty serious across Europe and the world. And I want to start with that to say that the world has learned of what a lockdown means, taking away your right to meet your friends, taking away your right to actually go about your normal business. But the people of Kashmir have been suffering these lockdowns for decades. And it's the reason we're gathered here today is to actually remember a massacre. And that's what it is. The Chota Bazar massacre on the 11th of June, 1991. I don't think many in the world will ever be aware of this. And it's our duty here now to do so. Because if I was to say Sharpeville massacre, I'm sure many on this call and many that are listening across the world will automatically go and say, yes, that's what happened in South Africa in 1960, 21st of March, where 69 people were massacred by the apartheid government in South Africa. Or closer to home for me is Bloody Sunday, an event that happened before I was born, but still relevant for us in Britain, where British troops, similar to what we are talking about here, just opened fire on unarmed civilians protesting at a civil rights march in Londonderry. And despite denials at the time and despite these judicial inquiries, it's only decades later that actually the UK government hasn't acknowledged that the people killed were innocent victims. And there have been plans and, people have tried to seek prosecution of those soldiers. So we need to keep the faith to say justice will be done. The passage of time doesn't mean that justice no longer is required for the victims. As we saw in Bosnia, we were able to drag both the political leadership and the military leadership to The Hague and try them. And that's what we've got to keep up. We've just seen what's been happening in Gaza and Palestine and Israel. And we look at that and we are frustrated as Kashmiris that we don't get the level of coverage on that. And there's a role for us in this, that we need to educate our non-Kashmiri friends of why we are so concerned about what's happening in Kashmir and draw parallels. So when we talk about Chota Bazar, we just say that is the Kashmir equivalent to Bloody Sunday, or that is the Kashmir equivalent to the Sharpeville massacre, because then people will be able to compare and contrast and actually realize that, oh, right, this is a grave injustice similar to what happened in South Africa or in Northern Ireland. And I think we've got to keep the pressure up on Modi. Mr. Modi's government may well be powerful in the country because of the mandate it's got from the 2019 elections. But let me tell you from personal experience, Mr. Wani, it's very intolerant. Any criticism they do not like. And therefore, that's the one thing we've got to carry on doing. No matter where we are, in my case now, I'm still a city councillor here in Sheffield, the fourth largest city in England. I'm the leader of the opposition, so I still have a platform. It's not the same platform I had when I was in the European Parliament. That doesn't stop me from making representations, and it's not stopped me from speaking, not only to people from Kashmir, but also I've been able to share platforms with senators from Australia, human rights activists from America, including from the Hindu community. We all deeply are concerned about not just what's happened in Kashmir, but right across India. And you're right to point out, Ali Raza Saab, the issues about the Citizens Amendment Act, which are not going away. It's just been put on hold because of the issues of COVID, but at some point that will come back. And what we need to do is challenge our governments, particularly here in the West, about human rights. And for me, it's not specific to Kashmir. Human rights are universal. The rights of humans right across the board concern me and bother me. So therefore, I want my country, United Kingdom, to have an ethical foreign policy in which it does trade with the world, but says to anyone that it trades that you've got to sign up to some key, what I used to call European values, and they'll continue to be European values, which is to respect human rights, abide by international law, minimize your impact on the environment, and promote equality, particularly for women. And that should be across the board with any trade deal with whichever country, and in particular with India, with its atrocious human rights record. And we have to point out to our friends in the West about the situation of human rights organisations like Amnesty International and others who, let's be honest, have been forced out of India by the crackdown on the government. And at the moment, they're having a crackdown on social media, because that's been the avenue of Kashmiris to get their side of the story out. Because at the moment, the media in India is pretty much in the pocket of the BJP government. So therefore, it's really important to my Kashmiri brothers and sisters, particularly on the Indian side of the line of control, that we got to get your messages, your video footage out. And it doesn't matter how it gets out, whether it's internet blockages in Srinagar itself will not stop your message getting out. It simply means you'll have to travel out into Delhi or somewhere else to send us those videos. And please do so, because that light allows us to shine a spotlight, and it actually allows us to embarrass British MPs here who are supportive of the BJP government. And when we say, well, is this what your UK values stand for? The fact that people are able to be shot with impunity because of these crazy human rights laws that exist and these Police Special Powers Act. And my challenge to all of us is, if you think them laws are okay, then let's have them in the United Kingdom as well. Let's see you live underneath those sort of laws, those police powers. Because if it's not good enough for us, and we want a better standard of law and order, then why should we allow the government of India, which claims to be the world's biggest democracy, to have laws that give immunity to paramilitaries and soldiers and police to do what they want, abuse who they want? And the facts remain that those individual soldiers have to be held to account, Mr. Wanisab, and you're very right, that we got to start to name and shame those and have them on international watch list to say, just because you may have left the army, your crimes will follow you. And no matter what job you take, whether it's in India or elsewhere, and we see a lot of migration now to the West, Australia, US and Europe, of individuals, that we've got to say to them that you can't just come to the United Kingdom and live a normal life with blood on your hands. The fact that you've allowed soldiers underneath your command to murder, massacre and rape civilians, that's a crime against humanity. And no matter where you are, just as the Nazis were chased around the world and brought to justice, similarly, the perpetrators of human rights abuses in India, no matter if they remain in India or moved across the world, what we should have is be steadfast to say, we will bring you to justice. No matter how long it takes, and this is 30 years, this Chota Bazar massacre, it doesn't matter. Like I said to you before, the Bloody Sunday massacre happened before I was even born in 1972. And even now, that is an issue that's been very kind of sensitive to us in Britain. It's a deeply shameful event in our history, if I'm going to be honest. The fact that soldiers were able to shoot people, peaceful protesters, and thought they could get away with it, and they shouldn't get away with it. And just as they shouldn't get away with the Bloody Sunday massacre here in the UK, the Chota Bazar massacre should not be allowed to just be swept under the carpet. So thank you for keeping up the campaigning, Mr. Wanisab. Nice to see my former colleague Julie Ward there on the call as well. I look forward to hearing what Julie says as well. And thank you to the colleagues who've spoken, particularly from Sydney and elsewhere.